A glow emanating from my 13-inch Panasonic TV VCR combo illuminated my eyes as the parental advisory logo popped up on the screen. The logo gave way to these words: Adult Swim may contain material that parents find unsuitable for viewers under the age of 14. I was about 9 years shy of 14, and though I couldn't yet read the words, I would have justified my viewing of the programming by explaining that it was okay because I had my big sister by my side, although she herself was about 5 years too young to be watching as well. Up until then, I had spent most nights sharing a bed with my mother, but ever since discovering this surreal portal to a mystery land that popped up on the Cartoon Network at 10 p.m. every night, my sister and I had been huddling in my room, stifling mischievous laughter at shows and jokes we hardly understood but knew were unlike anything else. That was the fabric of Adult Swim, a unique identity separated from all else on television or elsewhere. An identity that holds up today, one where viewers can tune in and fall into the programming as long as they're watching during those magical hours. At 5 years old, I was hooked, but I could have never comprehended the type of imprint Adult Swim would leave on the face of pop culture. Today, we'll study how Adult Swim transformed into a cultural influencer, first by tuning in to its unique brand of humor, next switching the channel to examine its imported programming and how that influenced things, before finally setting the remote down and paying attention to its impact on music. The most obvious influence of Adult Swim is its unique comedic style, one that embraces cringe and awkwardness and a level of random humor, one that can perhaps best be examined through the example of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, a programming which was Cartoon Network's first original programming. Originally, the channel just broadcast old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, but head of development Mike Laszlo was handed just a little bit of money to create something original, and so he came up with the concept of reusing Hanna-Barbera animation, fusing it into a talk show format in which real live-action interviews were conducted with famous guests, but edited to make it look like a dialogue with the cartoon character of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. As Ramsey S. would explain in his article Space Ghost Coast to Coast and the Birth of Weird, this level of bizarre, random humor, one that used lots of awkward editing and long pauses, deliberately weird, strange humor that stems from seemingly obscure places, random thoughts, wasn't always at the forefront of our culture. It wasn't always prominent among the internet and on the fringes of television now. That originates from Space Ghost and the original Adult Swim shows that came from it. That bizarre brand of surrealistic humor is all originating from the bed of Adult Swim. Rachel Arrest examines this further in Horrifyingly Absurd: How Did Millennial Comedy Get So Surreal? She says, if you wanted to trace the roots of this simultaneously silly and slightly alarming comedy, you'll likely find yourself at the door of Adult Swim, the U.S. network that has distinguished itself with programming that is startlingly, sometimes horrifyingly absurd. What began with deliberately poor production values has flowered into a tonal universe. Look across the internet and you'll see all sorts of the same trademarks of Adult Swim humor back in 2001. Poor production values, awkward timing, cringe humor. Adult Swim's definitely had an impact there. But Adult Swim's trailblazing methods don't stop at their original content. In fact, Adult Swim has led the way in seeking bold, inventive content aside from just in-house productions, and that begins with their broadcasting of mature anime, something that no other channel was doing at the time. Adult Swim began airing Cowboy Bebop in 2001 with the launch of Adult Swim. As Alex Susskind explains in Asteroid Blues, The Lasting Legacy of Cowboy Bebop, as Cartoon Network producer Sean Atkins explains in special features interview of the remastered edition of Bebop, Watanabe's show created a whole new world. It's hard for me to quantify the impact that I think it has had. I think it redefined cool within animation, not only in Japan, but in the States. Anime now is a huge industry, one in which has many US fans, but back then it was contained to kids shows like Pokemon or even further back Speed Racer. Adult Swim brought mature anime to a big audience. Of course, it doesn't just stop at anime, though. Walter Newman, the head of development at Adult Swim, explains, we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. We're looking online, we're looking on Instagram, we're looking on Facebook, we're looking on Vine, we've hired writers off of Twitter accounts. If you can clearly display a unique voice, that's what works for us. Adult Swim has always scoured the internet for talent, something that stretches back to Children's Hospital, a web series that it adopted into its own programming in 2009. In fact, its current largest hit, Rick and Morty, of which I'm wearing a shirt right now, originated from a web series called The Adventures of Doc and Morty. Adult Swim has always been on the lookout for unique creators from all sorts of avenues, and that includes abroad, online, wherever. The expanse of Adult Swim isn't contained to visual mediums, however, but stretches to auditory ones as well, which can be exemplified through the founding of William Street Records. In fact, yes, Adult Swim does have a record label, which it founded when Jason DeMarco, who was assistant creative director at Toonami, was contacted by then underground producer Danger Mouse to fund a collaboration project between him and underground rapper MF Doom. DeMarco approached Lazo, they agreed to fund the idea, and voila! Adult Swim had a record label. Billboard cites Danger Doom, the collaboration, as even going as far as ranking at number 2 on the alternative independent charts, and says that Adult Swim has had a massive impact on the music industry through that. There's not many channels with its own music label, and there's fewer channels that even have the ability to launch whole careers as Adult Swim did in the case of the musician Flying Lotus. As David Holmes explains, by striking a variety of partnerships with independent labels and musicians, DeMarco has provided artists with huge amounts of exposure, featuring them during the network's quirky late-night Adult Swim programming. Such is the case of artist Steven Ellison, who performs as Flying Lotus, when he blindly submitted dozens of tracks to Adult Swim until DeMarco finally bit. Since then, Flying Lotus has garnered heaps of critical praise and has collaborated with the likes of Snoop Dogg, Thom Yorke, and Kendrick Lamar. Yes, Adult Swim's influence is even stemming into music. For nearly 2 decades, Adult Swim has been at the forefront of subversive, innovative television, fueling countercultural content while influencing the mainstream in turn. What began as the institution that began as a simple programming block at night for Cartoon Network has now launched into a channel of its own. From its influence on today's humor to open-minded content recruiting to music, Adult Swim offers content unlike any other entity. It's held my attention for 13 years, and I'll continue to tune in. Adult Swim signing out. Oh, and by the way, I know I'm not dressed professionally, but I figured since it's an Adult Swim shirt, and I'm talking about an entity which has eschewed professional sort of boundaries, maybe that'll pass.